I know some people have had a little bit of difficulty wrapping their arms around well, you should, make a commitment to a school for 4 years, and if you don't, you should have to sit out. And those days are gone. And I think that those days were largely unfair to the players anyway.
Intercepted by Charles Woodson. Collins off the Heisman.
They will not catch Lamar Jackson.
35-40. He's on his way. Desmond Howard is going all the way. That is a Heisman Trophy winner.
Hello Heisman. Jimmy Roberts along with Desmond Howard. So pleased to be joined by a special guest now. Pat Forde, longtime reporter covering college sports and covering a lot of things, but particularly college football. Pat, welcome to the pod, and so glad you could join us. Let's start with something which has become a piece of terminology that we've had to get used to more recently that wasn't even a part of the discussion not long ago. Transfer portal. Why don't you begin by explaining it? What exactly? It sounds like a term from Star Trek.
It does. It does. It sounds like the transporter beam where, yes, you could go from the ship to the planet and back and forth and all those cool things. I don't think it's quite that technologically wondrous, but it has been a game changer for sure, guys. The fact that players now have immediate eligibility has totally, I think changed the dynamics of transferring. It's changed the number, the pace, the way teams are built, the way players look at their careers. And so, basically it has allowed much more freedom of movement, I think, for players to go from school to school, looking for whether it's playing time, whether it's an academic fit, whether it's a coaching fit, whatever the case may be. And that's just the way of the world now. And I know some people have had a little bit of difficulty wrapping their arms around well, you should, make a commitment to a school for 4 years, and if you don't, you should have to sit out. And those days are gone. And I think that those days were largely unfair to the players anyway. And now we don't have to worry about it. If a player seeks a different opportunity, they don't have to sit and wait to get it. They can go get it quickly.
Pat, what are some of the pros and some of the cons that you've heard, especially coaches talk about when they mention the transfer portal?
Yeah, there are certainly pros and cons. I think the pro is freedom of movement and the ability to go play where you want to play, when you want to play. The cons, obviously, it does create roster turmoil. It creates some uncertainty. I think that coaches are scared, maybe a little too scared of, well, I didn't play a guy this week, so he's going to leave next week. I think some of that's been somewhat overstated. But the ability to balance a roster in terms of scholarships, I think, has become a bigger issue. You could overbook yourself very easily. You can end up with too many players, and that's why there's actually been NCAA legislation that's been passed where I think that you in the future you're only going to be able to sign 7 transfers in a year.
Okay.
So that's going to be a bit of a change there. The other thing too, there's too many players in the portal.
Right.
More players there than there are places to go.
Right.
And that's a little bit of a wake up call for some guys. It's like, well, I'll just go here. It's like, oh wait. Maybe here doesn't want you, and so that becomes an issue. So I think I think this will all even itself out, and eventually people will get a better grasp on it. But for now, if you are too impulsive and you jump without knowing where you're going to land, it can leave you in limbo.
The word that I think of is turbulence. The landscape is just so much different than it was just a handful of years ago. And I'm hearing you talk about this, pending or potential legislation. Limit to 7 transfers? Can you imagine? And we haven't even spoken about college basketball, for which I would imagine the same rules will probably apply. But people are just moving all over the place, and it just, I think, adds to the transient nature of rosters.
Well, it does. There's no doubt about that. And that's hard for, I think, fans, certainly of a certain age at least, to wrap their arms around. Probably for coaches and administrators as well, that you're not used to seeing that and seeing people just up and leave and move, and it becomes a little bit more like pro sports free agency, so to speak. But that is the nature of the beast, and those are the times we live in. And people can transfer from one dental school to another and not have to sit out a year. They can transfer from one music school or a business school or whatever, the quote unquote regular students. So this at least we're on a more equitable footing. Like the athletes aren't put in some special holding area for a year because they're athletes that regular students wouldn't be. But if you guys and if you look at youth sports, it has become more transient. If your players transfer high schools, they switch club teams, and this is even more so for basketball. But even in football, you're at one high school as a sophomore, you're at a different one as a junior, the third one as a senior. So this is just basically kind of trickled up, I would say, to college.
I tell you what, I remember Lane Kiffin talking about Alabama. He said, well, I think he used the term free agency, which I kind of agree with. I think this is the college football's version of free agency. And he looked at Nick Saban's, roster and said, look, they get this, incredible linebacker named Henry To'o from Tennessee. And then they get this wide receiver, Jameson Williams from Ohio State, and how they're increasing their roster. And he seemed to be kind of against this free agency that's evolved in college football, so to speak. I guess what's your take on these players and when they couldn't transfer before, right? Well, they could transfer, but they could not play immediately. I think that was acting as a deterrent from guys just really jumping ship, because you got to think, it's like, okay, if I leave, then I can't play the following year and I have to wait to the next year to play. I think that used to be like a deterrent. Now, since that's been removed, what is your take on what could be the next deterrent, so to speak, to try to even things out? Because like you said, the transfer portal is like is overbooked right now.
Yeah, and I think that will be the deterrent, Desmond, is that they're going to see, oh my gosh, my teammate, tried to leave from school X to go to school Y, and there wasn't any room for him at school Y. And so when you see guys go into the portal and end up with nowhere to go, I think that probably will be a bit of a reality check for folks, and that could be the deterrent. And again, if they're going to limit it to 7 transfers that you can sign in a signing class, that caps it. And there's been some schools, Michigan State, I don't remember whether the number was 14 maybe that they brought in transfers. That was a high turnover thing to get their roster where they wanted it, and it's worked. But you're not going to be able to do that at that volume, at least going forward. So I think when the numbers come down a little bit, and when players see that if there's 900 guys in the portal and there's 500 spots, then 400 guys are hurting. Then that probably will be a bit of a perspective check for them.
Gotcha.
You mentioned it before, and really this is a correction. It's about equity. The situation as it existed was in no way fair to the athletes themselves. The thing that jumps out to me is the fact that if a coach decided to leave a school and an athlete was there, he couldn't leave without sitting out a year. So, he had lived up, or he or she, depending on what the sport would be, had lived up to their commitment, but the coach left. Shouldn't the player have been freed from their commitment? So I do think it's a correction. But the thing that I'm thinking about is, how does this impact high school recruiting now? Because with more and more players coming in through the portal, what does that say about, what these schools are going to be in the market for when it comes to high school students?
No doubt about it, Jimmy. That if you're sitting there in high school as and you're eyeing going to whatever the school may be, you have to keep in mind as a freshman, I can jump right in and play. Oh, wait, but they might also bring in a 22-year-old who's proven himself at a different school, and that guy jumps ahead of me immediately. There's no guarantee that what the roster looks like from your vantage point is going to be what it is. Once you get to December, that's generally when football guys are going to start looking to transfer. December, January, it may take longer for some. And there, it could also get messy with some guys in terms of academics and transferring, and that's one of the concerns. Certainly, is like, what happens to your major and all of your credits you've been working for towards getting a degree, and does that do those transfer with you, and how easily? But yeah, if you're in high school, I think that it's trickier than ever to figure out what exactly you'll be getting into. Hopefully, the places you're looking at, the coaches will shoot straight to you as far as, we may bring in transfers at your position, but you can't necessarily count on that in recruiting. I mean, they're going to tell you what they want to tell you to get you in the door. One other thing I did want to bring up real quick in terms of why this is a more fair way of doing things is almost every sport in college athletics, you could already transfer and have immediate eligibility. It was just the revenue ones. It was football, men's basketball, women's basketball, maybe one other one. But if you were a volleyball player, if you're a softball player, if you are a swimmer, a wrestler, whatever, like my kids, I mean, you could be at one school 1 year and swim the next year somewhere else, and you didn't have to sit out. So this at least now gets every sport in a uniform set of rules.
That is an excellent point, because I don't think the average viewer or the average fan knows that. I don't think they know that at all. So that's a really, really good point. And I guess my question would be, why such strict regulations on the revenue generating sports and not the other sports?
Control and money, right?
Yeah.
You just said it. Yeah. That's the coaches in those sports didn't like seeing their star players upping and leaving, and so they wanted to make it harder for them to do so, and they have more clout and they have more control and there's more money at stake. There you go.
Wow.
All right.
That's good. That's good
so
stuff.
let me pivot a little bit here and touch on something that Desmond and I have talked about, which drives me absolutely freaking crazy, okay? So the college football playoff. Now, it's better than it was, and now we hear that there's discussions to perhaps expand it to 12 teams. I'm raising my hand right now to say we are on the verge of ruining the best sport there is, because right now, every Saturday matters. If you expand this to 12 teams, you're definitely going to end up with 2 lost teams, maybe some really elite program who's lost 3 games, won by a lark or something like that in the playoff. How does that really serve? I mean, we're just one step away from becoming hockey here.
Yeah, well, the Stanley Cup playoffs are pretty good.
Well, yeah, but let me ask you this. Do the Stanley Cup playoffs, what does the regular season mean in hockey? I mean,
obviously, look, there's no doubt that there would be a slight diminishing of the importance of the regular season.
Slight?
I think slight. I do. I mean, I don't think it would ruin it. I'm not one of those people that says that, oh my gosh, the games won't matter anymore. I think they still will. Because I think, first of all, if you do 12 and you have 4 first round buys, the competition to get those 4 will be very significant. Mm-hmm. And who can get those?
I agree.
And then, and that's going to be conference champions. So winning a conference championship will matter. And then if you're in that next tier, 5 to 8, you get a home game. That will matter. And the 9 through 12, you got to go play somewhere else. And I would love to see, number 9 seed. This is what it would have been last year. I think number 9 seed Georgia going to number 8 seed Cincinnati and playing Nippert Stadium in December when it's 30 degrees or 28 degrees, whatever. Hey, sign me up for those games, and I will take a slightly less important cocktail party or slightly less important Red River rivalry or some of those other games. And look, Jimmy, I'm not disputing your point at all about how great the regular season is, but I still think it'd be pretty darn fun, and we could have 12-team playoff that would be awesome.
Pat, you brought up a good point about Georgia traveling up to Cincinnati, and I was talking to a good friend of mine about the SEC. And have you ever noticed that, especially in the latter months of the season, they don't travel to the Midwest or to the East Coast to ever play games? Like I would love to see an Alabama or a Georgia play up in the Big Ten country or somewhere in that region especially in November, December. They never do it. So I have to say, Jimmy, if the college football, if it expands to 12 and we can get those types of games where now we have these guys who are traveling out of their comfort zone and playing in the nasty, inclement weather that we're used to playing in the Midwest, I would love to see that because we never get a chance to see it. We never do.
Yeah, listen, I think there's definite value in it. I think the thing that bothers me most is that what's driving the bus here is money. I mean, it's all 100%. About the money. And it's 100%. I don't think anybody who's putting this whole idea together is thinking about, having Georgia have to come and play in the big house, and deal with the snow. I think what they're thinking about is, what was the estimate that I saw? $800 million or something more in revenue? I mean, believe me, I think that's what's driving the bus here, and I think that's what bothers me. I would suggest, why not something like a 6-team playoff, okay? Because first of all, you would have competition, give the first 2 seeds a bye. Expanding it to 6 doesn't get it beyond the level, I think, where, you're talking about teams that haven't earned the right to compete for the national championship. I mean, look at the NCAA basketball championship. 68 teams now. Anybody who thinks that hasn't devalued the regular season is crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has. But still, I also think that when the NCAA basketball tournament went to 64 was the greatest thing that's happened to college sports. I mean, that tournament became phenomenal. It was great. It was good at 32. It was good at 40. It was good at 48. It's great at 64. 68's stupid, but whatever. Although, I think UCLA was one of those last teams in and ended up going to the Final Four last year.
Yep.
But no, I mean, 6 would work. Look, I would be okay with 6. You could get the Power 5 champions and at large, but I would like to see more inclusiveness and give more people a shot at it. And I am specifically more thinking of the Cincinnatis and the Central Floridas, Coastal Carolinas.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
That can put together great seasons and not even have a sniff of it. I mean, Cincinnati kind of got a sniff last year, but the committee made sure they stayed down far enough, by golly. Keep them below 2-loss Iowa State. But yeah, I care less about 9-3 Big Ten third place team getting in than I care about making sure there is a place for the best of the group of 5 schools.
Right, got you. Well, all right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, Pat's going to give us some insight into one of the toughest decisions he's had to make as a Heisman voter. We'll be right back. Okay, Pat, thanks for joining us. But we can't let you leave without giving us one of the toughest decisions you've ever had to make as a Heisman voter.
Okay, it's usually pretty hard because there's a lot of deserving people out there. I will say the 1990 choice was not difficult. Desmond Howard was the easy choice there. But for me, I'm sorry, 91. My bad, 91.
No problem.
For me, in 97, I voted for Charles Woodson. I felt good about voting for Charles Woodson, but I felt bad for Peyton Manning, who was second on my ballot, and had an unbelievable career at Tennessee. And I could have easily, if he would have won, I would have been happy for him. But I thought I did vote for Woodson, but I felt a little bit bad not putting Peyton's name on top of that. And then I think in 2004, when Adrian Peterson was a freshman, I voted for him. Matt Leinart won that. And, hey, Matt Leinart, great player, great career, great season. Again, I wouldn't take it away from him at all, but I thought Adrian Peterson was probably the best player that year. And then the other one, I thought Deshaun Watson, I think, was runner-up, but maybe twice to Derrick Henry and to Lamar Jackson. And I voted for Lamar in 2016. I don't remember whether I voted for Derrick Henry, but I thought Deshaun Watson was a Heisman-caliber college player.
All right, we said that this is a man who's covered college sports, both football and basketball, all sorts of other sports for a long time. And that's the way we introduced him when he came on, Des. But really, his primary credential, at least this year, is he is the father of an Olympic silver medalist, Brooke Forde. won silver for the United States as part
Yes,
of the
sir.
200-meter freestyle relay team. Pat, have you recovered yet?
My feet are almost back down to the ground now. It's been a couple of months,
Congratulations.
but yeah, thank you very much. And Jimmy did a beautiful piece on us from Tokyo. It was very nice on NBC. But, that's the thrill of a lifetime. And you guys, as parents, I mean, whatever your kids are doing, you are proud of them. But to be involved in sports and to cover the Olympics, that was my 9th Olympics to cover, and to be there with my child competing was like completely, mind-blowing and humbling, and an experience I will never forget, that's for sure.
And you had to cover the race, which is just the craziest thing of all. Listen, Pat Forde, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a great year for you. We look forward to catching up with you as the season goes along.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Desmond. Enjoyed it very much.